3 weeks ago, I came across something online that I can't stop thinking about. It was a piece of trail camera footage posted by several different accounts across multiple platforms, all within the span of a few days. No one could agree on where it came from originally. Some said it was filmed in Wisconsin, others claimed Michigan, a few insisted it was from somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. What everyone did agree on was this: the footage showed something that looked disturbingly like a dogman, and it was the clearest recording anyone had seen in years. The video itself is only a few seconds long. It's daytime, and the camera is set up along what looks like a game trail cutting through dense forest. It walks on two legs, not shambling or awkward like a person in a costume would, but smooth and deliberate, like it belongs there. The creature stops in the center of the frame and turns its head slowly, scanning the area as if it senses the camera or hears something in the distance. What struck me immediately was the proportions. This thing is tall, I think maybe 7 or 8 feet, with broad shoulders and a torso that tapers down to a narrow waist. The arms are long, hanging past where human arms would end, and they move with a fluidity that feels wrong somehow, like they have an extra joint or too much flexibility. The head is the most unsettling part. It's clearly canine, wolf-like, with a pronounced snout and pointed ears that swivel independently. You can see the ears move as the creature turns its head, tracking sounds we can't hear. Then, after holding that position for about 4 seconds, it steps forward out of frame, disappearing as suddenly as it appeared. So before we go any further, make sure you subscribe and let us know where you're watching from. Thanks. Now I know what you're thinking. Trail cam footage is easy to fake. People have been creating hoax videos since cameras became cheap and accessible. I thought the same thing when I first watched it. But here's what made me keep digging. The accounts that posted it weren't cryptid channels or paranormal enthusiasts trying to build an audience. They were outdoor forums, hunting communities, and a couple of nature photography groups. The tone of the posts was less, "Look at this amazing creature," and more, "Does anyone know what this is?" That difference matters. People looking for attention tend to make bold claims. These posts felt like genuine confusion. I reached out to a few of the accounts that had shared the footage, trying to trace it back to the source. Most didn't respond, but one person from a Wisconsin hunting forum got back to me. They said the video had been sent to them by a friend who claimed it came from a trail camera set up near the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest, Wisconsin. The friend apparently had received it from someone else, and that person had gotten it from yet another source. It was a chain of forwards, each step removing more context until the origin became impossible to pinpoint. The person I spoke with said the original file had metadata that placed it in early October, but the metadata could have been altered or stripped and re-added. They also mentioned that whoever first posted it had done so anonymously, using a burner account that went inactive shortly after. That pattern, the anonymous posting and the quick disappearance, raised red flags for me. Either someone wanted to share something real without being associated with it, or someone was very good at creating the illusion of authenticity. I spent hours analyzing the footage frame by frame. The movement is what kept drawing me back. When you watch a person walk, even when they're trying to move carefully, there's a certain rhythm to it. Heel strike, weight transfer, toe off. It's predictable. The creature in this video moves differently. Its gait is more fluid, almost gliding, and the weight distribution looks wrong for a human. The knees bend at angles that would be uncomfortable for us, and the hips rotate in a way that suggests a different skeletal structure. Then there's the head turn. When the creature stops and looks around, the movement is smooth and continuous, sweeping across an arc of maybe 90 degrees. Human necks don't move like that without the shoulders shifting. This thing turns its head independently, and you can see the ears adjusting, flicking toward different directions. That kind of detail is incredibly hard to fake, especially in a costume. Animatronic heads with that level of articulation require controllers and visible mechanisms. I didn't see any of that in the footage. Of course, computer-generated imagery could explain it. CGI has reached a point where it can be disturbingly realistic, and someone with the right skills could create something like this. But here's the thing. Good CGI is expensive and time-consuming. It requires software expertise and a significant investment of effort. Why would someone go through all that trouble just to post anonymously on a hunting forum and disappear? There's no monetization, no fame, no clear benefit. It doesn't add up. That discrepancy, the mismatch between the apparent effort and the lack of payoff, is what kept me hooked. If this was a hoax, it was an expensive and elaborate one with no obvious motive. If it wasn't a hoax, then what I was looking at was evidence of something that shouldn't exist, according to mainstream science. Either option was fascinating. To understand why this footage matters, you need to understand the Dogman legend. The stories go back further than most people realize. Indigenous tribes across the Great Lakes region have accounts of creatures they called by different names but described in similar terms. Wendigo in some traditions, though that term carries broader spiritual meanings. Others spoke of wolfmen or forest guardians, beings that walked upright and hunted at night, protecting territories from intruders. The modern Dogman phenomenon started gaining attention in 1987 when a Michigan DJ named Steve Cook wrote a song called The Legend as an April Fool's joke. The song told the story of a creature seen in northern Michigan every 10 years, dating back to 1887. Cook made it all up, or so he thought. After the song aired, his station was flooded with calls from people claiming they had seen exactly what he described. Some of these callers had encounters that predated the song by years or even decades. They had never reported them because they didn't think anyone would believe them. What Cook stumbled onto was a pattern of sightings that had been happening quietly for a long time. People in rural areas, hunters, campers, loggers, had been seeing these things but keeping quiet about it. The song gave them a framework to talk about it, a cultural reference point. Suddenly reports started coming in from all over Michigan, then Wisconsin, then other states. The descriptions were remarkably consistent. A bipedal canine, 7 to 9 feet tall, with a wolf-like head, muscular build, and an aggressive territorial behavior. Skeptics, understandably, point to the song as proof that the sightings are the result of suggestion and mass hysteria. People heard the story, and then they started seeing what they expected to see. That explanation works for some cases, but it doesn't account for the reports that came before 1987 or the consistency of descriptions across different regions where people had no contact with each other. It also doesn't explain the physical evidence, tracks, damaged property, livestock kills that accompanies many of these encounters. One of the most compelling aspects of Dogman reports is how they differ from other cryptid sightings. People who encounter Bigfoot often describe a creature that seems curious but avoidant, something that watches from a distance and leaves when noticed. Dogman encounters, by contrast, are often described as terrifying. Witnesses talk about feeling hunted, about the creature displaying behavior that suggests intelligence and intent. It doesn't just run away, it stalks, it circles. In some reports, it tests boundaries, getting closer over time as if assessing a threat. There's a famous case from the early 1990s in northern Wisconsin that illustrates this behavior. A family was camping in a remote area when they started hearing something moving around their site at night. At first, they assumed it was a bear or a pack of coyotes, but the sounds were wrong. The footsteps were heavy and bipedal, two distinct thuds with a rhythm that suggested walking on two legs. The family stayed in their tent, listening as whatever it was circled them for hours, never coming close enough to see clearly but never leaving either. The next morning they found tracks around their campsite, deep impressions in the soft earth, larger than any wolf or dog print, with elongated toes and claw marks. The stride length was over 4 feet, too long for a human. They also found scratches on a tree near their tent, high up, maybe 8 or 9 feet off the ground. Long gouges in the bark that looked fresh. The family packed up and left immediately. When they reported it to local authorities, they were told it was probably just a bear. But the father insisted that what he heard walking around their tent was not a bear. It was something that walked upright, and it had been watching them. Stories like that one are common in Dogman lore. The creature is almost always described as exhibiting behavior that goes beyond animal instinct. It seems to understand human technology, avoiding trail cameras most of the time, circling camps without entering, and disappearing when confronted. That kind of pattern suggests not just intelligence, but awareness, the ability to recognize threats and adapt to them. Which brings me back to the trail camera footage. If this is real, it represents something incredibly rare. A dogman either not noticing a camera or not caring about it. Most reports say these creatures avoid being photographed. They seem to sense cameras, or at least they avoid areas where cameras are placed. The fact that this one walked directly into frame and stopped, almost posing, is anomalous. It raises questions about whether the creature knew the camera was there and chose to be seen, or whether it was distracted by something else and didn't notice. I went back through the footage again, focusing on the moment when the creature stops and turns its head. There's a subtle change in its posture just before it moves. The shoulders tense slightly, and the head tilts in a way that suggests it heard something. Not the camera, which would have been silent, but something in the forest beyond the frame. Whatever it heard made it pause, assess, and then move on. That behavior, stopping to listen before proceeding, is consistent with predatory animals, but the body language is too human, too deliberate. Another thing that stood out to me was the lack of eye shine. Yes, we should have some eye shine even during the day for nocturnal animals. Not so much as during the night, but still should be some eye shine you can spot. Most mammals have a reflective layer in their eyes called the tapetum lucidum, which helps them see in low light and creates that glowing effect when light hits their eyes at night. Trail cameras use infrared light, which should trigger eye shine in anything with a tapetum. But in this footage, the creature's eyes are not reflecting. That could mean several things. Either the angle was wrong and the light didn't hit the eyes directly, or the creature doesn't have the same reflective layer that other nocturnal animals do, or it's not a real animal and someone overlooked that detail when creating the footage. I brought this up in a few online forums, asking people with experience in wildlife photography and videography what they thought. The responses were mixed. Some pointed out that eye shine can be inconsistent depending on the angle and the distance from the camera. Others noted that primates, including humans, don't have a strong tapetum. So if the dogman is somehow related to primates rather than canines, the lack of eye shine might make sense. That idea, a primate-canine hybrid, sounds absurd, but it's one of the theories that gets thrown around in cryptid communities. Of course, the more I dug into this, the more I realized how much of the dogman phenomenon exists in a gray area between folklore and eyewitness testimony. There are hundreds, maybe thousands, of reported sightings, but very little physical evidence that holds up to scrutiny. A few tracks, some hair samples that turned out to be from known animals, and a handful of blurry photos that could be anything. The lack of hard evidence is frustrating, but it's also consistent with the behavior described in reports. If these creatures are intelligent and avoidant, they would naturally leave minimal traces. One theory I kept encountering is that dogmen are not animals in the traditional sense, but something else entirely. Some people believe they're interdimensional beings, creatures that exist in our world only temporarily or under certain conditions. That explanation, while outside the realm of conventional science, would account for why they're so rarely seen and why physical evidence is scarce. If they're not permanent residents of our reality, they wouldn't leave the kind of traces that a flesh and blood animal would. I'm not saying I believe that. Interdimensional explanations feel like a way to avoid the harder questions about whether these things exist at all. But I mention it because it's part of the conversation, and ignoring it would mean ignoring how people who claim to have encountered these creatures try to make sense of what they experienced. For many of them, the standard explanations, misidentification, hoaxes, hallucinations, don't fit what they saw, so they reach for alternatives, even if those alternatives sound impossible. What I find more plausible, though still speculative, is the idea that dogmen could be an undiscovered species. We like to think we've catalogued all the large animals on Earth, but that's not true. New species are discovered regularly, even large ones. In the past few decades, scientists have confirmed the existence of animals like the saola, a forest-dwelling bovine in Vietnam, and the giant squid, which was purely mythological until we found specimens. If those creatures managed to avoid detection for so long, why couldn't something else? The problem with the undiscovered species theory is that it requires a breeding population. For a species to survive, you need a certain number of individuals spread across a viable habitat, That means more sightings, more tracks, more evidence. The fact that Dogman reports are spread out across multiple states but remain relatively rare suggests either a very small population, which would be on the verge of extinction, or something else is going on that we don't understand. There's also the question of diet. A creature that size would need a substantial food source. Deer, smaller mammals, maybe even scavenging from human sources. Some reports do mention livestock kills that could be attributed to dogmen, but those are often explained away as wolves, coyotes, or feral dogs. Without a body or at least clear predation patterns, it's impossible to say definitively what these creatures would eat or how they would survive in modern environments where their habitat is shrinking. Looking at the trail camera footage again with all this context, I started to notice smaller details I had missed. The way the creature's fur, if it is fur, seems to lie flat against its body rather than sticking out like a wolf's coat. The hands, or paws, which are difficult to see clearly but appear to have elongated fingers or digits. The posture, which is more upright than any wolf or dog, with the spine held vertically rather than at an angle. Each of these details in isolation could be explained away. The lighting makes the fur look different. The angle distorts the proportions. The video quality is too low to see fine details. But taken together, they create a picture of something that doesn't fit neatly into any category we have. It's not a bear, not a person, not a wolf. It's something in between, or something entirely separate. I also reached out to a few people who claim to have had Dogman encounters, asking them to watch the footage and tell me if it matched what they saw. Most were hesitant to go on record, even anonymously, but a few responded. One person said the movement was almost exactly what they remembered from their encounter in northern Michigan in 2003. They described seeing a creature cross a logging road at dusk, moving on two legs with a gait that was unnervingly smooth. They said the footage captured that quality perfectly, the way it moved like it owned the space. Another person said the head shape was wrong. They had seen a dogman up close enough to make out details, and the snout was longer and more pronounced than what appears in the footage. That discrepancy doesn't necessarily invalidate the video, though. If these creatures exist, there's no reason to assume they're all identical. Variation within a species is normal. Maybe some have longer snouts. Maybe some are taller or heavier. Without a reference population, it's impossible to say what's typical. The more I studied this footage, the more I realized I was facing a choice. Either I accepted that it could be real, which meant accepting a lot of uncomfortable implications about what might be living in our forests, or I dismissed it as a hoax and moved on. Neither option felt satisfying. The first required a leap of faith that went against my instincts for skepticism. The second felt like giving up too easily, ignoring details that didn't fit the hoax narrative. So I decided to approach it differently. Instead of trying to prove or disprove the footage, I started asking what it would mean if creatures like this did exist. How would they survive? Where would they live? What would their interactions with humans look like? And most importantly, why haven't we found definitive proof yet? The survival question is tricky. North American forests are vast, but they're not untouched. Logging, development, and recreation have fragmented habitats and pushed wildlife into smaller and smaller areas. For a large predator to avoid detection, it would need to be incredibly adaptable, moving between areas of deep wilderness and staying away from human activity. That behavior has been documented in animals like mountain lions, which can live surprisingly close to human populations without being seen. If dogmen have similar adaptability, it would explain how they remain hidden. Habitat is another factor. Most dogman sightings cluster around the Great Lakes region, particularly Michigan, Wisconsin, and parts of Minnesota. That area has dense forests, abundant water sources, and a relatively low human population density in many areas. It's prime habitat for a large predator. But reports also come from other regions, including the Pacific Northwest, the Appalachian Mountains, and even isolated cases in the South. That geographic spread suggests either multiple populations or highly mobile individuals capable of covering large distances. The interaction question is where things get interesting. Most dogman encounters are brief and occur at night or in low light. The creature is seen, often at a distance, and then it disappears. Close encounters, where the witness is within a few feet of the creature, are rare but memorable. These close encounters often share common elements. The creature displays aggressive body language, standing tall and staring directly at the witness, but it doesn't attack. It's as if the creature is warning the person to leave without actually engaging in violence. That pattern of intimidation without aggression suggests intelligence. A purely instinct-driven predator would either attack or flee. The fact that these creatures seem to use psychological tactics, staring, following, making noise, indicates they understand cause and effect and can choose their responses based on the situation. That level of cognition would be rare in the animal kingdom, found mostly in primates and a few other highly intelligent species. As for why we haven't found definitive proof, the simplest explanation is that we're not looking in the right places or using the right methods. Most wildlife research focuses on known species. Resources are limited, and scientists prioritize studying animals that are documented and understood. Cryptids, by definition, fall outside that scope. The few researchers who do investigate creatures like dogmen are often working independently, without institutional support or funding. That makes it difficult to conduct the kind of systematic long-term studies that would be needed to gather solid evidence. There's also the issue of confirmation bias in both directions. Believers see every piece of ambiguous evidence as proof. Skeptics dismiss everything as misidentification or hoax. The truth, if there is one, probably lies somewhere in the middle. Some reports are genuine mistakes, some are deliberate fabrications, and some might be encounters with something real that we don't have a framework to understand yet. After weeks of analyzing this footage, talking to witnesses, and reading everything I could find about dogman sightings, I still don't have a definitive answer. What I have instead is a growing sense that there's more happening in our forests than we acknowledge. Whether that's an undiscovered species, a series of elaborate hoaxes, or something we don't have words for yet, I can't say with certainty. What I can say is that the footage is compelling. The movement, the proportions, the behavior, it all points to something that doesn't fit the standard explanations. If it's a hoax, it's one of the best I've seen. If it's real, it's one of the clearest pieces of evidence for the dogman phenomenon that's ever been made public. The trail camera that captured this footage is out there somewhere, possibly still running, possibly taken down by whoever set it up. If the person who originally posted the footage is reading this, I'd love to hear from you. I understand why you might want to remain anonymous, but any additional context, the exact location, the date, what you were hoping to capture, would be invaluable. Even if you don't want to go public, I hope you realize that what you shared has reignited conversations about whether these creatures exist and what they might be. For the rest of us, the footage raises uncomfortable questions. If something like this can walk through a forest at night, undetected by everything except a single trail camera, what else is out there that we haven't seen? How many other pieces of evidence have been dismissed or ignored because they didn't fit our understanding of the world? And more personally, how safe are we when we venture into the wilderness, believing we know everything that lives there? I don't have answers to those questions. What I do have is a newfound respect for the unknown. The forests of North America are vast, and our understanding of them is incomplete. We like to think we've mapped every corner and cataloged every species, but the truth is we've barely scratched the surface. There are places so remote that humans rarely visit, places where an animal or something else could live its entire life without crossing paths with us. This footage, whatever it shows, is a reminder of that reality. It's a glimpse into a world that exists just beyond the edge of our awareness, a world where the rules are different and the creatures that inhabit it don't care about our categories or our skepticism. They simply exist, moving through the shadows, leaving behind just enough evidence to make us wonder. In the weeks since I first saw this video, I've watched it hundreds of times. Each viewing reveals something new, a detail I missed before, a movement that seems slightly off. I've shared it with experts in wildlife biology, video analysis, and cryptozoology. Their opinions range from obviously fake to, I don't know what this is, but it's disturbing. No one has been able to definitively prove it one way or the other. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the value of footage like this isn't in what it proves, but in what it makes us consider. It forces us to confront the possibility that our understanding of the natural world is incomplete. that there are gaps in our knowledge large enough for something as significant as a 7-foot bipedal canine to slip through undetected. The Dogman legend, whether rooted in truth or imagination, serves a purpose. It reminds us that the wild places of the world still hold mysteries. It keeps alive a sense of wonder and caution that our ancestors knew intimately, but that we've largely lost in the modern age. We walk into the forest with smartphones and GPS, confident in our ability to navigate and understand. But every so often something happens that reminds us how little we actually know. A hiker sees something in the trees that moves wrong. A hunter finds tracks that don't match any animal they recognize. A camper hears sounds at night that make their skin crawl. And occasionally, very occasionally, a trail camera captures 8 seconds of footage that defies easy explanation. This particular footage has made its way into the broader conversation about cryptids and unexplained phenomena. It's been analyzed, debated, and dissected by communities that care deeply about these subjects. Some see it as the smoking gun, the clearest evidence yet that dogmen exist. Others see it as just another in a long line of inconclusive videos that prove nothing. Both groups are probably right in their own way. What I've learned from this experience is that belief is complicated. It's not a simple matter of yes or no, real or fake. It's a spectrum influenced by personal experience, evidence, and the stories we tell ourselves about how the world works. Someone who's had a close encounter with a creature they couldn't identify will see this footage differently than someone who's never set foot in the woods. Both perspectives are valid even if they contradict each other. For me, this footage sits in that uncomfortable middle ground. I can't prove it's real, but I can't dismiss it either. The details are too consistent with witness descriptions. The movement is too fluid to be easily faked. The circumstances of its release, anonymous, unmonetized, and quickly spreading through niche communities, don't fit the pattern of typical hoaxes. It feels different. If you're someone who spends time in the woods, whether for work or recreation, this footage might change how you think about those spaces. It might make you more aware of your surroundings, more attentive to sounds and movements that seem out of place. That heightened awareness isn't a bad thing. The wilderness demands respect, and part of that respect is acknowledging that we don't know everything about what lives there. The Dogman, whether myth or reality, represents something primal in our relationship with nature. It's the predator in the dark, the thing that watches us from the shadows, the reminder that we are not always at the top of the food chain. That archetype appears in cultures around the world because it taps into a deep, instinctive fear. We evolved to be wary of predators, and even though most of us no longer face that threat in our daily lives, the fear remains, buried but accessible. This trail camera footage, if nothing else, has brought that fear back to the surface for a lot of people. It's made them think twice about hiking alone at night, about camping in remote areas, about the sounds they hear outside their tent. And while some might see that as irrational, I think there's value in it. Fear, when it's grounded in awareness rather than panic, makes us careful. It makes us better observers. It keeps us alive. As I wrap up my thoughts on this, I keep coming back to one question. What would it take for this to be accepted as real? A body? Multiple videos from different sources? A live capture? Each of those would be monumental, and each seems unlikely for different reasons. If these creatures are as rare and elusive as the reports suggest, finding one might be a matter of luck as much as effort. And if they're not real, then no amount of looking will produce the proof people want. What I do know is that this footage has done what good evidence should do. It's started conversations. People are talking about what they've seen, what they believe, and what they're willing to consider. That dialogue, even when it doesn't lead to concrete answers, is valuable. It keeps the question alive, and as long as the question is alive, there's a chance we'll eventually find an answer. The trail camera that filmed this might have captured the clearest dogman footage we've ever seen, or it might have captured an elaborate fake. Until we know more about where it came from and who posted it, we're left with speculation. But that speculation is part of the process. It's how we move from not knowing to understanding, even if that understanding takes years or decades to reach. In the meantime, I'll keep watching the footage. I'll keep looking for new details, new patterns, new ways to make sense of what I'm seeing, and I'll keep listening to the people who claim to have encountered these creatures, because their stories, whether they're evidence of something real or just very convincing narratives, matter. They tell us something about how we relate to the unknown and how we cope with experiences that don't fit neatly into our worldview. If you've seen this footage or heard about it from someone else, I encourage you to watch it for yourself and form your own opinion. Don't take my word for it or anyone else's. Look at the movement, the proportions, the behavior. Consider the context or lack thereof. Think about what it would mean if it's real and what it would mean if it's not. Both possibilities are worth exploring. And if you're ever out in the woods at night, hiking or camping in an area where dogman sightings have been reported, pay attention. Listen to the sounds around you. Watch for movement in the trees. Trust your instincts if something feels wrong. The vast majority of the time, there's a mundane explanation for what you're experiencing. But every once in a while, the explanation isn't mundane. Every once in a while, it's something that shouldn't be there. Something that walks on two legs and watches you from the darkness. This trail camera footage, whether it captures a dogman or something else entirely, is a reminder that the world is bigger and stranger than we usually acknowledge. It's a call to stay curious, to question, and to remember that for all our technology and knowledge, there are still things we don't understand. Maybe we never will. Maybe some mysteries are meant to stay unsolved. But that doesn't mean we should stop looking. The footage is out there now, circulating through forums and social media, sparking debates and speculation. Some people will watch it and move on. Others will obsess over it the way I have, looking for meaning in every frame. A few might be inspired to set up their own trail cameras, hoping to capture their own evidence, and somewhere maybe the creature in the video is still out there, moving through the forest, unaware that it's become the subject of so much attention. For more stories like this, consider subscribing. And if you've had your own encounter with something you couldn't explain, I'd love to hear about it. The more we share these experiences, the closer we get to understanding what's really out there, lurking just beyond the light of our campfires and the reach of our trail cameras.